The principal cut off the mother during the parent meeting, but the video made the whole school rethink itself. "You don't have to finish that sentence, Mrs. Hill," Principal Drexler interrupted, voice smooth as a blade. The room hushed, not out of respect, but because everyone knew what she was about to say, and no one wanted to hear it. Mrs. Hill stood motionless. Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice hadn't. She hadn't cried. Not yet. But that interruption, that silencing, was a slap not just to her, but to every silent parent who had come before her and swallowed the same disrespect in the name of diplomacy. It was supposed to be a parent-teacher meeting. Supposed to be. But when your son's locker is smeared with racial slurs, when he's sent to detention for talking back while others get warnings, when he gets suspended for defending himself against a shove, supposed to be stops mattering. That night, no one in the room knew someone was filming, and no one expected the video to go viral. It all began the way it always begins, with something small. A joke, a look, a note. Jordan Hill was 14, quiet, bright, and obsessed with old jazz records. He could identify Coltrane from 3 bars. He had never once missed an assignment, never raised his voice to a teacher, and still asked his mom if she wanted help doing the dishes. He was also one of the only black students at Alder Creek Middle School. When Jordan came home with clenched fists and eyes too tired for his age, he didn't tell his mom at first. Not about the names. Not about the time Mr. Weathers rolled his eyes when he asked to be partnered with someone else for a project. Not even about how kids would whisper things just loud enough. "Why don't you just say something?" his mother asked one night, after catching him staring at his textbook for 10 minutes without flipping the page. And he did say something. He started reporting. First to his homeroom teacher, then the counselor, eventually even Drexler. Each time they nodded solemnly. Promised action. Promised to look into it. They never looked. So when he was given detention for disrespectful tone, after asking why his essay got a C when he followed every rubric point misses, Hill asked for a meeting. And when he was suspended after another student pushed him and he pushed back, she demanded one. That meeting was Tuesday night. Alder Creek prided itself on being inclusive. That word was painted right beneath their school motto in the gym, where the meeting was held. Mrs. Hill walked into that room like she had walked into dozens of other straight-backed, polite, over-prepared. She wore navy slacks and a blouse she had ironed twice, her hair pulled neatly into a bun. She came with notes, emails printed out, a spreadsheet of the incidents. She had rehearsed what she would say. Not to attack, not to accuse, just to be heard. The meeting had begun with pleasantries, test scores, acknowledgments, budget concerns. When it came time for parent concerns, Mrs. Hill stood up, nodded politely, and began speaking. "I want to talk about patterns. Patterns that aren't on paper, but are just as real. I've watched my son shrink this year, not from puberty, but from silence. Because he knows that when he speaks, no one listens." She wasn't yelling. She wasn't emotional. But just 40 seconds into her statement, Principal Drexler interrupted. "You don't have to finish that sentence, Mrs. Hill." No one flinched, except her son, who had been sitting in the back. The phone camera that captured the moment belonged to Vanessa Zhao, another parent who had started filming out of boredom. But when Drexler interrupted, she didn't stop recording. The video was short, just over 2 minutes. It showed Mrs. Hill trying to continue, trying to explain that racial bias was not a theory for them, it was a daily lived truth. It showed Drexler cutting her off again. "We're here to discuss academics, not accusations." It showed no one else speaking up. No one. Just Mrs. Hill, standing there, blinking slowly, her face a mask of calm fury. The next morning, Vanessa posted the clip on her private Facebook page. By evening, it was everywhere. People saw what they weren't supposed to see. The casual dismissal. The practiced deflection. The way institutions wear smiles like armor. "She wasn't even angry," someone commented. "That's what makes it worse," someone else replied. Within 48 hours, the district was fielding media requests. Alder Creek tried to release a statement, "We value all voices," but it only made things worse. Former students began posting their own stories. Jordan's old classmate, Malik, posted about the time he was the only one searched during a locker check. A former teacher anonymously shared emails she had sent about inequitable grading policies that were ignored. One post read, "I was Jordan Hill 5 years ago. I left that school thinking I was the problem." Mrs. Hill didn't want a media circus. She wanted change. She declined interviews. She didn't post anything. But when a student-led protest began to form on Friday, organized by a multiracial group of 8th graders, she baked cookies and showed up. They held signs that read, "Hear us?" and "We are not imagining this." Jordan didn't say much, but he stood in front, holding a cardboard sign with one word, "Listen." Behind closed doors, the school board was panicking. They urged Principal Drexler to apologize publicly. He refused. "It wasn't racial," he said. "It was procedural." She was out of time. "She had only been speaking for 40 seconds, someone replied. "Doesn't matter," he snapped. "We can't let this become a witch hunt." So the board convened an emergency session. And then the other video surfaced. This one wasn't from the parent meeting. It was from 2 years prior. It showed Drexler laughing at a party, repeating a racially charged joke, clearly unaware he was being filmed. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. This wasn't about one interruption anymore. It was about a pattern. The community divided. Some defended Drexler, said he was a good man who didn't mean harm. Others said meaning doesn't matter when harm is done. The next Monday, Mrs. Hill finally broke her silence with a letter. She didn't post it. She printed 200 copies and handed them out in front of the school. It read, "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for my son and for every other child who walks into a room knowing they're already seen as too loud, too sensitive, too angry, too much. We don't want your pity. We want your awareness. And then we want your action." Jordan didn't go back to school that week. Not because he was afraid, but because he needed a moment to breathe. He stayed home, listened to jazz, wrote music. And the world outside kept turning. But it was watching, because something had shifted, and they couldn't pretend it hadn't. Principal Drexler didn't resign. Not yet. Instead, he doubled down. In an internal email that was quickly leaked, he wrote, "We must not let emotional overreactions overshadow the educational priorities of this institution." Emotional overreactions. That's what he called a mother trying to protect her son. A student's quiet protest. A community's reckoning. By Wednesday, half the faculty had signed a petition demanding the district investigate bias in the administration. By Thursday, a group of Black alumni, now lawyers, professors, artists, published an open letter titled, "We survived Alder Creek, but we shouldn't have had to." It listed years of ignored complaints, suspensions, quiet transfers, glaring double standards. What once felt like a whisper became a roar. But Drexler wasn't afraid of noise. He was afraid of change. That Friday, he called for a mandatory assembly. Students only. No parents allowed. They said it was about unity. They handed out pre-approved talking points to teachers. Jordan, who had returned to school that morning, sat in the third row. His hoodie was pulled low. His hands were in his lap. Principal Drexler stood at the podium and smiled wide. "We are one community," he said. "We grow through our differences." Some kids clapped. Some didn't. Then, out of nowhere, a voice cut through the silence. "Then why did you shut my mom down?" Every head turned. Jordan had stood up. No yelling, no rage, just steady truth in his voice. Drexler's face didn't twitch. "This isn't the time, Jordan. That's what you said to her." Silence. And then, a voice from the back. "Let him talk." Another, "Yeah." And another, "We all deserve to be heard." The clapping started slow, uneven, then louder, until Drexler had no choice but to step back. That night, Mrs. Hill waited by the door when Jordan came home. She was bracing for the worst. But Jordan didn't look defeated. He looked calm, lighter somehow. "They tried to shush me," he said, grinning a little. "But I didn't let them. Across town, a different meeting was taking place. A group of parents, mostly white, mostly affluent, had gathered to discuss what they were calling the overreaction. Some blamed social media. Others blamed cancel culture. One man said, "This is why everyone's afraid to talk now." But even in that room, a crack formed. Vanessa Zhao raised her hand. "You're afraid to talk?" she asked. "What do you think it feels like to be silenced for years?" No one answered, because silence had always protected them until now. By the next week, things began to shift. Teachers held listening circles in class. For the first time, students were encouraged to share experiences, real ones, raw ones. A sixth grader named Maya recounted being told her natural hair was distracting. A seventh grade boy described the way a security guard always trailed him through the halls. A girl who had never spoken in class before whispered, "I used to think maybe I deserved it." Teachers cried. Some apologized. And still, Principal Drexler remained quiet. But the district wasn't. They announced an independent review of Alder Creek's policies, with a focus on racial bias. They invited students and parents to participate. Mrs. Hill didn't want to. She was tired. Tired of being the one to carry it all. But Jordan asked her to come. "For me," he said, "just once more." At the forum, Mrs. Hill wore the same blouse from the parent meeting. She stood at the microphone. She looked around. No notes this time. "I didn't come here tonight to convince anyone of anything," she began. "I came because my son asked me to, and because I want to believe this place can be better than it was." Her voice wavered, not from fear but from exhaustion. "You don't know what it costs us," she continued, "to stay calm when we want to scream, to explain things that shouldn't need explaining, to walk into rooms where we're already seen as problems before we speak." The room was still. She wasn't the only one who spoke that night. More parents stood up. Some who had stayed silent before. Some who had once doubted her. One white mother tearfully admitted she had never noticed the bias until her adopted black daughter came home crying after being told she was too aggressive for raising her hand too quickly. It wasn't one moment. It was years of moments. Layered. Invisible. Devastating. The report came out 2 weeks later. It was scathing. It detailed decades of uneven discipline, disproportionate suspensions, a culture of deflection. It didn't name Drexler directly, but it didn't need to. Within 24 hours, he resigned. No press conference. No apology. Just a memo. "I am stepping down to allow the school to move forward." It was the first time he'd been right about something. The district named an interim principal. A black woman. Former teacher. Quiet storm. Her first action. Creating a student equity council, led by Jordan and 2 others. Her second. Reinstating teachers who had spoken up and been sidelined. When she walked into her office, she found a folded note on the desk. No name. Just one sentence. "Please don't stop listening." Mrs. Hill didn't celebrate. There was no parade. No medal. Just a quiet dinner at home. The 2 of them. Spaghetti and jazz playing softly. Jordan hummed along. Mid-song, he said, "You didn't let them break you." Mrs. Hill smiled. "I didn't let them break you," she corrected. He nodded. Same thing. But this wasn't the end. Change is not a moment. It's 1,000 hard choices. 1,000 voices refusing to be quiet. Some parents pulled their kids from the school in protest of the new direction. Some teachers quit. But others joined. And students began speaking differently. Louder. Freer. No more whispers in hallways. No more pretending. They posted poems on the walls. Created art out of anger. Held meetings where no one was interrupted. 1 month later, Jordan stood on stage at the school assembly. He was nervous, but not afraid. He looked out at the crowd and began. "I used to think fairness meant being quiet, letting things go, keeping the peace. But peace without justice isn't peace. It's permission. And I'm done asking for it." The auditorium lights buzzed quietly above Jordan's head as he stepped off stage. His palms were still damp, and his heart still thudded in his chest like a slow drum. But there was something else now: relief. Not because it was over, but because it had finally started. People clapped, not the polite kind. It wasn't for performance. It was for truth. And it wasn't just his classmates. It was teachers, staff, even the janitor, Mr. Raymond, a tall man who'd never said more than 5 words to Jordan, gave him a proud nod from the back of the room. A week ago, Jordan had wanted to disappear. Now, people saw him, and not as a stereotype. Not as a problem. They saw him. But change is a clumsy thing. And not everyone wants to change. Outside the school gates, a different story brewed. A small but loud group of parents had formed a coalition. They called themselves Voices for Stability. They spoke at board meetings, wrote op-eds, claimed the school was losing focus and being overtaken by political agendas. They never used the word race, but everyone knew what they meant. "We just want our kids to feel safe," they'd say. Safe from what? From being held accountable? From hearing uncomfortable truths? They wanted Drexler back. They wanted Jordan silent. But silence was no longer the default. Mrs. Hill began receiving letters. Some were kind, grateful, honest. Others were venomous, typed with fake names. No return addresses. One simply said, "You broke our school." She didn't show Jordan. She didn't need to. But one evening, while she was sorting mail, Jordan picked up a letter she hadn't noticed. The handwriting was small, shaky. Inside was a note. "I was a teacher at Alder Creek in 1987. I tried to speak up then. I was told I was imagining things. You weren't imagining anything. Thank you for not letting them bury it again." He read it twice, then 3 more times. When he looked up, his mother was watching him. "I'm okay," he said, but his eyes glistened. Back at school, the new principal, Ms. Carter, was moving fast. She implemented new training for staff, brought in community organizers for workshops, and made restorative justice a part of the daily curriculum. But she knew this wasn't about ticking boxes. It was about building muscle. One day at a time. One story at a time. Jordan's story had opened a door. Others began walking through. In Ms. Ramirez's 8th grade English class, they read James Baldwin. Then they wrote letters, not essays, not assignments. Letters. To someone they had hurt, or someone who had hurt them, or to a version of themselves they'd forgotten how to love. One boy stood up and read his out loud. "Dear Marcus, I'm sorry for laughing when they made that joke about your skin. I laughed because I was scared they'd turn on me next. You never said anything, but I knew I let you down. I'm saying something now." Marcus didn't say anything. He just nodded. But that nod was louder than any scream. In the art room, Miss Kearney handed out blank canvases and asked, "What does justice look like to you?" Some painted fists. Others painted family dinners. One girl painted a tree with names carved into the bark and one red leaf falling from its branch. "It's about losing one part," she said, "so the rest can keep growing." But with every step forward, there were reminders of how far they had to go. A hallway bulletin board was torn down one morning. Someone had written, "We deserve to be seen," in big, bold letters. Underneath, someone else scrawled, "Not all of us." In the bathroom, slurs reappeared in Sharpie. Security guards increased their rounds. But Ms. Carter didn't react with fear. She reacted with clarity. She gathered students from every grade and asked, "What do you want to do about it?" They didn't ask for punishments. They asked for a wall. Not for division but for expression. A wall where students could write truths anonymously. They called it the mirror. Within days it was full. "I hate being the only one like me in the room. My teacher called me the wrong name all year. My mom says not to make waves. I'm not angry, I am exhausted. I just want someone to ask how I'm doing." And then one in small blue ink, "I'm learning. Please don't give up on me." For the first time in years, Alder Creek wasn't just talking about equity. It was living it. Messily, imperfectly, honestly. Jordan started a podcast with 2 classmates, one Latina, one Filipino. They called it Unmuted. Their first episode, Why we stayed quiet. It wasn't angry. It was real. They talked about fear, about guilt, about waking up, and people listened. The episodes were played in advisory periods. Parents tuned in, even teachers. One day, Mr. Weathers, who once rolled his eyes at Jordan, stopped him in the hallway. "I listened," he said, "to your podcast. I realized I've got some work to do." He didn't say sorry, not yet, but he said something, and Jordan nodded. That was enough for now. At home, Mrs. Hill started sleeping better. Not because the world had changed, but because she wasn't the only one fighting for it anymore. One night, Jordan came downstairs and found her at the kitchen table. Laptop open, eyes wide. "You okay?" She looked up and smiled. "I'm writing," she said. "A letter." She shook her head. "A book." He blinked. "What kind of book?" She turned the screen to him. The title read, "Say It Anyway, A Mother's Story." Jordan sat beside her and read the first line out loud. "They told me I was out of line, but what they meant was, I was out of their place." 1 month before graduation, the school held its first Unity Week. It was more than cultural dress days and food trucks. It was forums, story circles, theater, debate, and on the final day they showed the video again. That video, the one that started it all. Not as a weapon but as a mirror. Some students had never seen it before. Some teachers hadn't watched it in full. And as the clip played, Mrs. Hill, standing steady, Drexler interrupting, the silence that followed, something unexpected happened. People began crying. Even students who once rolled their eyes at the whole thing. Even teachers who had once looked away. Because sometimes we need to see the ugliness to understand the beauty of what comes after. That afternoon, Jordan gave a second speech. Not from a stage this time, just in a circle of students and staff. He held up his phone, where he had saved a screenshot of one of the first hateful messages they received. "People said we broke this school," he said. "But maybe some things need to break before they can breathe." The circle was quiet, and then Ms. Carter spoke. "Let's keep breaking the right things," she said, "and building better ones in their place." Graduation came with late spring warmth and restless nerves. The school's front lawn had been transformed. Folding chairs lined up like puzzle pieces, flowers coiled around the stage posts, and a banner that read, "Together we rise." Mrs. Hill sat in the 4th row, right behind the student section. She wore her Sunday-bested deep blue dress with a silver brooch and clutched a tissue folded tightly in her hand. She hadn't cried yet. Not even when she helped Jordan iron his gown that morning. Not when she pinned his honor cord in place. Not even when he slipped a small note into her hand that simply said, "Thank you for not sitting down." But now, as the music started, she felt it swell. Not grief, not even pride. Release. Jordan walked in near the middle of the procession. Head high, shoulders strong. No more hoodies pulled low. No more shrinking to fit. As he passed his mother, he gave a small nod. She nodded back. That was theirs. The ceremony began with the national anthem, followed by a speech from the interim principal, Ms. Carter. It was short, deliberate. "Some schools measure success by test scores," she said. "We will measure it by courage." Then came the awards. Some were expected. GPA, athletic achievements, college acceptances. But then, Ms. Carter paused and smiled. "We have one more recognition," she said. "It doesn't appear on transcripts. You won't find it on a certificate. But it's the kind of honor that changes things." She reached down and lifted a small glass plaque. "The Voice Award," she announced. "For the student who reminded us all that silence isn't safety, and that truth, when spoken with love, can heal more than it harms." She called Jordan Hill's name. The crowd erupted. Some students stood. Some teachers wiped their eyes. Jordan walked to the stage slowly. He didn't take the mic. He didn't need to. He just held the plaque high and smiled. That night they had cake at home. Just him and his mom. Chocolate from the grocery store. They sat in silence for a long while, not out of awkwardness, but peace. Mrs. Hill finally broke it. "You know what I realized?" she said. "What?" "All that time I thought I was just yelling into the void. Turns out I was planting something." Jordan nodded. "Yeah, and it grew." In the following months, Alder Creek changed in ways big and small. They updated the curriculum to include more diverse voices, not just in Black History Month, but all year. They brought in mental health counselors trained in trauma-informed care. They created anonymous reporting systems for bias incidents and actually responded to them. More importantly, students learned to speak and listen with intention. A ninth grader named Tariq launched a spoken word club called Raw Language. A 10th grade girl organized a peer mediation team. A group of seniors published a digital zine titled Unwritten Rules, exploring the things students of color were expected to tolerate but never allowed to question. And in the teacher's lounge, a small poster stayed pinned to the wall. "If they trust you with the truth, don't meet it with defense. Meet it with action." But not everyone stayed for the long haul. Some staff members left quietly. Others complained loudly about wokeness, about discomfort, about how things used to be. But the school didn't bend to them anymore, because too many people had already stood up. Too many voices had already been heard. And once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Jordan went on to college. He majored in journalism, minored in social justice, started writing op-eds, got picked up by local papers, then national ones. He wasn't famous. He wasn't looking to be. But his words made ripples. One article in particular, "What Silence Taught Me About Power," was shared across school boards nationwide. One quote was even printed and taped to a classroom door at Alder Creek. Silence is not neutral. It's a decision. And every decision shapes someone's life. Mrs. Hill kept writing. Her book was published the following spring. It didn't hit bestseller lists, but it found its people. Mothers reached out from across the country. Teachers, students. She began speaking at conferences. But she never stopped being Jordan's mom. One day, years later, she was invited to speak at a teacher training in a state 3 time zones away. As she stepped off stage, a young woman approached her. "I know you don't remember me," she said, "but I was in the back row the night you spoke at Alder Creek." She paused. "I wasn't ready to hear it then, but I never forgot it. And now, I'm a teacher." Mrs. Hill blinked hard, smiled, and shook her hand. "Then I guess it worked." Back at Alder Creek, Ms. Carter was no longer interim. She'd been made permanent. She didn't run the school like Drexler did. No more sweeping things under rugs. No more prioritizing reputation over reality. Instead, she created what she called listening days. Once a quarter, the whole school paused. No tests, no assignments, just story sharing, feedback circles, healing workshops. Some parents rolled their eyes, but most stayed silent, because the students were thriving, not just academically, humanly. Jordan came back on CETO visit during one of those listening days. He slipped into the back of the auditorium, unnoticed at first. A sophomore was standing at the mic, talking about a teacher who had finally learned how to pronounce her name, about what that meant. Jordan felt tears press at the back of his eyes, not from pain, from gratitude, because this was the school they had fought for. After the session, a boy approached him, probably 14, skinny, nervous. "Are you Jordan Hill?" he asked. Jordan laughed. "Depends who's asking. I read your article in class, the one about silence." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Did it help?" The boy nodded. "It made me tell my dad what happened with my old school." He looked down, then back up. "They didn't listen there, but here, they did." Jordan didn't say anything. He just put a hand on the boy's shoulder. And in that moment, everything came full circle. The story never became a movie. There were no glossy interviews, no awards, just a school that stopped pretending. A mother who refused to be silenced. A son who learned the power of his voice. And a community that finally listened. Not once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to start again. enough to begin something better. And sometimes that's all history needs.